Hi and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave and this is episode 1701A and today's date is October 28th, 2018 and the title of the episode is The Central Bank's Plan Disrupted, Now Trying to Backpedal, Goodbye. Let's get into the economic collapse financial news. Now, the deep state and the central bankers, they've had plans for a very long time and they were pushing towards a cashless society. And they wanted to make sure that no one had the ability to take the funds out of the bank. Remember, what they were planning to do was bring this entire system down. They were going to use bail-ins to go after everyone's funds and bring us to war. And this way they can explain the whole thing away. Now their plan is falling apart. And we know that Trump has been using their weapons against them. And what I'm talking about is the manipulation of statistical data. He's been using their models and making the economy look fantastic. And what we're seeing is the economy deteriorating in all different parts of the country, and not just the country, but around the world. Things are really starting to fall apart. And if you look at the stock market, I mean, this is what everyone looks at to say, hey, the economy's doing great, the economy's not doing well. This is what the central bankers use to let the people know how the economy is actually doing. Even if the economy is falling apart with retail, housing sales, nobody has jobs, things like that. If the stock market's up, the mainstream media, the central bank, they're always out there telling you how great the economy's doing. So what we're seeing right now is that October has been the worst October since the market crash in 2008. And it got even worse on Friday. The Dow was down around 296 points and the S&P 500 briefly dipped into correction territory. What we're seeing right now is that the last 5 weeks in a row, the market has lost about $8 trillion in global wealth. It was completely wiped out. This is the fastest plunge in global stock market wealth since the collapse of Lehman Brothers. And yet it's another confirmation that a major turning point is headed our way. Now, when we look at this, we can see a lot of things have happened. When the markets are very volatile, the overall trend tends to be down. And when you step back and you take a longer-term view of things, you can see the devastation is breaking through and you can see what's going on here. The Dow is down 9% from record high, down 4 of the last 5 weeks. S&P down 10.1% from record high, down 4 of last 5 weeks. NASDAQ down 13% from record high, down 4 weeks in a row. Dow Transport's down 15.2% from record high, down 6 weeks in a row. Small caps down 15.8% from record high, down 6 weeks in a row. In other words, the too big to fail banks around the world have already seen almost a third of their value wiped out. And this is just the beginning. Does it mean it's going to happen tomorrow? No. But what we're taking away from all of this is that the economy is deteriorating very, very quickly. And if we look at the housing market, which we've been talking about, and we don't just look at the housing market here in the United States, we look at the housing market around the globe, we can see how things are just completely imploding on itself. When we look at Australia, for instance, we can see that home prices, they stopped rising in many places. And when you look at this, you can see out in Sydney and Melbourne, housing prices, they are falling by over 1,000 a week. The boom time is over, and we're now officially experiencing the implosion of housing prices. It has found what many have been predicting. Prices are dipping as interest rates are rising, with our biggest cities feeling the winds of change most keenly. Now, finally, gravity has caught up with that stupidity and prices are falling. And in Australia, we've just tipped into negative territory with Canada right on the cusp. In each country, a reverse wealth effect is kicking in. Homeowners, they are seeing their equity in their houses, it's drying up. Their net worth is drying up. And people are getting nervous and afraid. They're starting to panic because they remember what happened back in 2008. And a lot of people believe this is their wealth. And for many, it is. Because a lot of people don't have that much in the bank. a lot of people are depending on the house price continually moving up. You're getting appreciation. And eventually, when you hit that certain age, you want to sell your house and reap the profits from all of that. We're seeing the opposite happen right now. What is happening here is that everything the central banks have set up over time is falling apart right in front of our eyes. And it's accelerating right now. And all the plans that the central bankers have put into place with the deep state, that is also falling apart. Think about what Trump is doing right now. He's removing the globalist central bank plans that they've been setting up for years and years and years. And when you start removing them, what happens? Things start to fall apart. Out in Sweden, this is at the Riksbank, they were trying to go cashless. They're saying we don't need cash. It's not a big deal. And this was in preparation for the bail-ins, because what they didn't want to happen was they didn't want people running to the banks, taking out their savings in cash and then, hiding it someplace else, because they wanted to use bail-ins to go in and take those funds to keep the banks alive. But right now they realize that their plans, they're all falling apart. What do you do when your plans are being ripped apart? Well, you can't stay on the same course. You have to reverse things. So Sweden's Riksbank, they become the first central bank in the 21st century to take concrete measures to ensure that cash does not disappear as a means of payment from the financial system. So they published a document on their website, and they're making it mandatory for all banks and financial institutions to offer cash services. If you go back a couple of years, it was completely the opposite, where they had thousands of articles posted on their website, and they were talking about a cashless society. And this was between 2013 up to when Trump got elected. Afterwards, everything started to change because they realized what was happening, and now they can't push that plan forward. And while they were talking about a cashless society, cash in circulation dropped by 35%, earning Sweden a reputation as the world's most cashless nation. Now everything is being reversed. The central banks, they are panicking right now. They're panicking because of everything that is going on in the world. And this is why they're speaking out against Trump. This is why they're saying that the tariffs are not going to work, the tax deductions are not going to work. Everything that he's putting forth, they're saying it's not going to work. And what they're really talking about is everything that he's doing is not going to work for them. Think mirror. Everything that is happening right now is to get rid of the central banks. Everything that is happening right now is to get rid of their trade deals. Everything that is happening right now is to get rid of the plan to go cashless. Everything that they planned is falling apart. And this is why they're continually pointing these things out, because what they're really doing is they're talking about themselves. They don't like what is happening. And what's happening right now is a complete reversal of everything that they try to push forward. And they have nowhere to run. They're backpedaling on everything right now, and they're going to run into major, major problems. This is why the IMF is saying that we're headed towards this Great Depression. They already knew what was coming. They already knew that the whole entire world was headed towards a recession, depression, but they wanted to cover it up. That's their plan, to cover up everything so they're not blamed. Now they're in trouble because there's a narrative shift going on. The narrative shift is going to point to the central banks. The narrative shift is to show that the central banks are responsible for the entire global economic system coming down. The narrative shift is to remove the central bank, to audit the central bank, to show that they've done things so illegal that it would make every single person around the world, their heads would be spinning, saying, what just happened here? How did we allow this? Never again, never again, never again. And this is what is happening right now. And this is why they're changing their tune. They have to reverse everything at this point. And they're hoping that people forget. But this is why we've been reporting on all this, so we don't forget. It's not to predict anything, to look into a crystal ball and say the crash is happening on this date, this time. It was about recording everything completely separate and apart from the mainstream media, to have a record throughout the entire portion of the Great Recession up to this point and everything that they were trying to do, so we don't forget what they were up to, and even going back in time to show what they were planning all along. This way, we can always counter the argument from the mainstream media, from the central bank, where they're saying, well, the economy's falling apart right now because of Trump. Well, we know better because we've been following the economy. Now, all of a sudden, they're jumping aboard the retail apocalypse. All of a sudden, they're talking about housing prices dipping down, that the housing market's going to implode on itself. Now they're talking about how the economy is not as great as Trump is saying it is. But we've been looking at the economy for a very long time, and we already knew that all of this was happening. I mean, think about it. If you go back to 2008, and prior to 2008, we were reporting on, say, the subprime securities. And we were looking at subprime securities, talking about how they're manipulated. There's no way they're AAA. Everyone in these subprime securities all wrapped up. These are people that really couldn't afford the homes. They're defaulting. A lot of speculators in there. And when we are looking at this, we can say that there's no way that the system can go on much further. And if we looked at corporations back then, we could say, look at these corporations, AIG, Lehman, and the rest. They're falling about. Look at the banks. They're falling apart. Now, of course, people would have called us crazy. They would have said, what are you, crazy? Look at the economy. It's fantastic. Actually, if you really look at those individuals that were looking into subprime security, they did call them crazy. Actually, Peter Schiff was out there, and they called him crazy. Who's really the crazy people? The people who are believing the propaganda. So back then, if we were reporting on all this, and there was a lot of people that were, and looking into it, in the beginning, you'd be crazy. But when it all fell apart, you'd be like, wow, they were right. Here we are looking at all of this, showing that it was falling apart, countering what the mainstream media was doing. Back then, if we would be countering the mainstream media because they had a completely different story. And today, we're showing the same exact thing. The mainstream media, the central bank, they just put the news out there to shape their narrative. It's not about telling the people the truth. It's not about telling the people this is what's really happening. The mainstream media protects the central bank. They're in collusion. If you want to talk about collusion, talk about the deep state, the central bank, and the mainstream media. They are colluding. And if you look at the economy today, we already knew, because we've been tracking it, that the economy never really recovered. It's not because Trump all of a sudden implemented tariffs. That's not why the economy is not going to do well. The economy never, ever really recovered. They created an illusion to make you think it did. Yes, it's very easy to do. It's very easy to go out and create and modify the statistical numbers, and people, when they look at them, believe the economy is doing well. It's very easy to continually push the stock market up and to print a lot of currency, or just push a button and then pass it along to banks to make it look like everything is great. It's very easy to create a stress test, which is absolutely meaningless, put it out in the mainstream media and tell people this is very important. The banks passed the stress test, so that means they are strong. No, it doesn't. Just like S&P and the rest of the rating agencies said the subprime securities were AAA rated. Were they? No. So what we're seeing is that we're headed towards this transition. The central banks now are backpedaling. They're panicking. They don't know what to do. They don't have their event to cover up their crimes. And if they don't have these events, what do? You have to try to reverse everything so you're not blamed for what is about to happen. But it's too late for that. Because once we hit into this global economic disaster, all fingers will be pointed at them. There'll be audits. There'll be investigations. There'll be everything. And they are finished. Goodbye, central bank. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.